What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and so I am here to make my, Dolphins rebuild from a Tua perspective video. So, I just recently made a video, about the Dolphins rebuild, where it is right now, so on and so forth, and there was a lot of things I talked about, obviously, like things like the drafting and the development, a lot of problems and things that I've been pointing out since 2019 that are wrong with this Dolphins organization and the things that we're seeing come to fruition now. I wanna talk about the same things, but just from a slightly different perspective. This perspective being, from Tua's perspective, basically. Because at the end of the day, when we decided to tank the 2019 season, it was for him. And obviously there's this big debate about, whether or not the Dolphins have done the right things to support him and to build around him and so on and so forth, right? There is a portion of the fan base and whatever that argues that, they absolutely built around him. This offense is built for him. These, receivers are built for him, blah, 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 all this stuff. But, and then I actually find it funny when people will try and argue that the success that they've had, because I've never once argued that they didn't put resources into it, but their failure at getting those choices right, whether it be free agency or the draft or whatever, that is important. You can't just be like, oh, well, they tried to build around him, but since they failed, they get a pass. No, you don't get a pass for that. It's just, anyway, it's ridiculous to me. So, but I do want to take a look at this from his perspective, and I do want to start back in 2019, because again, the tanking season, the 2019 tank season, the season in which we all said, well, not me, because I disagreed with it. I was never on board for it, because one, I will never root for my team to lose, but also because of the fact that I didn't see it working, because tanking doesn't work in the NFL. Okay, it never has, and it's not going to. It's barely worked in other sports. But in baseball and basketball, the sports where a tank philosophy has worked, those are totally different sports in so many different ways. One of the key ways being that they're not full contact sports. But anyway, and then the only recent example of a team that attempted it was the Browns. And yes, they're good now, but you can't count the tank successful if it took you 7 years to get there, 6 or 7 years to finally get to the point where not only are you making it to the playoffs, but consistently making it to the playoffs perennially, right? Because what a tank involves, and there's no question that the Dolphins did tank the 2019 season, because there are certain requirements to the tanking philosophy. And if I'm being honest, this is the first way in which they failed Tua even before they got the kid. Okay, a year before they got the kid, the initial philosophy that they had in place in order to get him, to be able to select him, was already the first decision they made that goes against him. Why? The reason for that is because no matter what, Tua was always going to have a super short leash. Always. In large part. Now, some of that had to do, of course, with the fact that we went 10-6 last season. We'll get to more of that later, and that raised the level of expectation. But with the tanking philosophy, and especially too, the context of Stephen Ross and how he operates is super important. Every single one of his coaches, he's fired at 3 to 3.5 years into their tenure. He's getting more and more impatient. He's getting older and more desperate. All of that is clear. Okay, initiating the tanking philosophy was the first major desperation move that Stephen Ross enacted, and it came from him 100%. Okay, but anyway, that was the first way, because what that entails is you literally have to strip your team down of all veteran leadership, talent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the big names, the expensive contracts, all of that. in order to accumulate draft capital and cap space. Okay? But it also means that you're basically going to shit away your first season. A lot of people say it doesn't count, but no, it absolutely does count because you chose to do it. It's not like you were bad accidentally or unexpectedly. No, you chose to be shitty. So you don't get an excuse for it. You don't get a pass for it. It 100% counts. But anyway, so you shit that entire thing away. And generally in a tanking philosophy, no matter what, you're supposed to have a very rapid turnaround. That's why you destroy yourself so quickly. That's why you strip everything down so fast, because the intent is to build it up really fast, especially because then you equip yourself with so many resources that theoretically you should be able to, because you're going to get premium talent and be able to sign the best free agents, etc., etc. Okay, so, and that's why the context of Stephen Ross and the way he thinks and operates is super important, because it adds other limitations to how long he's going to wait. When he first brought it, or when he first fired Adam Gase in his press conference, he said, I hope it doesn't take 1, 2, or 3 years, but I want to build a consistent winner. You add in the MO that he fires everyone. He has historically fired every one of his coaches 3 to 3.5 years. You add in the getting older and more desperate stuff, and you realize that, at least to me, that means that his blueprint for going into this regime was give them 3 years. And so that's massively important context that has to be tied in with the tanking philosophy and its already inherent quick turnaround principles. So you tank the first year, and then now normally I would say 2 to 3 years is about the time frame in which you would have after you strip your roster down completely and accumulate all those resources to build it back up. But I have said consistently that I think the way with Ross's MO stuff taken into account, they were going to have 2 years to get it right. So 2 years after the 2019 season. Okay, and it's looking like that's going to be roughly the case. I still hold pretty firm that I believe that at the end of the season, after this thing continues to go belly up, then Greer and Flores are going to get fired. But we'll see. There have been reports out recently that their jobs are safe no matter what. There were also reports that at one point Ross told Greer, hey, you get Watson and that's the way you could potentially save your job. So maybe that's going to be their, job saver for another year. As much as I don't want to hit the reset button every 3 years, I also agree with people that this regime's not going to get it done. So, as long as they're here, it's going to be a waste in my opinion. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back. So the tanking philosophy, because of its inherent quick turnaround, basic fundamental principles, it already set Tua off to a bad start, because he was then going to only have the 2020 and 21 season to really showcase if he could be the guy because of those parameters, right? Because he wasn't coming in until year 2 of the entire process, because the first year, again, has to be, intentionally shit away, so that way you can get your guy the next year by then having that high draft pick. Okay, so, but that's not the only way that they fucked him in the 2019 year, okay? They also fucked him because of the fact that they mishandled some things early on. Now, I've been one of the people that has consistently said since 2019, I don't now, obviously when 2019 had started, we hadn't seen yet if we hadn't witnessed any of their development yet. I didn't start really harping on their development issues until the following year, after I got a year's worth of information and data. But from 2019, I never liked how they drafted and the way that they navigated that situation. They didn't do a super lot in free agency in 2019 because they obviously weren't trying to be very good. So there was no reason to. They just brought in a bunch of guys off waiver wires from, other football leagues that failed, whatever, and stacked it full of a bunch of nobodies. And that in addition to Ryan Fitzpatrick and his leadership / gunslinger mentality, is why we got 5 wins in 2019. Again, I digress. Because the point here I'm making in the way in which they fucked Tua is, you knew you were going to go after Tua in the 2020 draft. They knew that ahead of time. Not me, because again, I didn't support it, but there was the tank for Tua chance and philosophy the entire 2019 season. So there's no way anybody can claim that they didn't know. They did, right? That it was a mystery to them and they decided last minute. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it worked. They knew. So my point here is that if you knew that you were going to get him, they also knew for the most part who he is. In other words, they know that he is a slightly smaller quarterback, right? As per the prototypical measurements, okay? And he's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he also has a range of injuries, including some pretty severe ones on his injury history. Okay, so knowing that, you should have gone into this process aiming to build something in the mold of, let's say, the New Orleans Saints, and build your organization and your team in that mold, because the guy who, was at quarterback for that organization for such a long time is one of the major comparisons that Tua draws, okay? He's oftentimes compared to Drew Brees, the lefty Drew Brees. That is his ceiling. He could eventually, and they are very similar quarterbacks in a lot of ways. He is a little bit more athletic than Drew Brees, but they're still similar in stature and build and in arm strength, right? And so what should you do? You should 100% focus primarily on the offensive line. Start with that. Don't worry about the bells and whistles until you make sure that you have a fucking chassis and a fucking engine, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Don't try and get all the fancy shit in the car until you know you have the basic shit. And it starts in the fucking trenches regardless anyway. Reason has said this a bunch on his channel. I've said it a ton for a long time now. Bro, I would much rather have an elite offensive line. And matter of fact, if I had a top 5 offensive line, I would be perfectly fine with an average to above average quarterback, much like Ryan Tannehill, and, an average to above average wide receiver core and running back group. Because the offensive line is where it stems, and that can make everything else, or rather, it can make the job for everything else that much easier. Now, and Ryan Tannehill is showing when you have in Tennessee, when you have a guy like him who, he can do just about everything. He doesn't have the greatest pocket presence, right? But he can do just about everything for you. All you got to do is build around him. Anyway, again, digress. So back to 2019 and how they fucked up. They fucked up because the primary way they fucked up in 2019 is first and foremost, they went out and traded for Josh Rosen. So they fucked away. And look, bro, because you knew you were going to get Tua in 2020, and because you were already planning to shit away the 2019 season to get that high draft pick for him, there's no reason to take a shot, to take a flyer on this quarterback, especially if you have to pay a 2nd round pick in 2019 and a 5th round pick in 2020 to get the dude. Because if he turned out to be great and wonderful, okay, then maybe you don't take Tua in 2020, but you were literally tanking the 2019 season for that guy. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. So instead of doing that, you hold on to your 1st round pick, or your 2nd round pick and that 5th round pick from 2020. You don't trade away that draft capital, which ended up being completely fucking wasted because obviously Josh Rosen didn't work out and he was never going to work out here. Again, because, look, people can say what they want about Josh Rosen. I'm not particularly high on him, and I think that, the Cardinals kind of mishandled him too and put him into a shitty situation, but it didn't get any better when he came here. He was literally going to a team tanking in that year. So anyway, point is though, he was never going to work. So keep that draft capital. And again, for me, instead of taking Christian Wilkins in round 1 after there was a run on defensive linemen, what would I have done? I would have taken one of the best offensive linemen, because again, not only is building in the trenches the prime philosophy to begin with, but then you add in the fact that you're going to be taking a quarterback in 2020 who's slightly smaller with injuries. Okay, so you build the motherfucking offensive line. That's where you should start. So instead of trading for Josh Rosen, keep your second round pick. Don't take Christian Wilkins after there was a run on defensive linemen. Instead, take one of the blue chip fucking offensive linemen. If I remember correctly, Garrett Bradbury is who I wanted. Take your stud offensive lineman there, right? And then in round 2, you can double back and go for, or, you could go get a defensive lineman. I would have been fine if they took another offensive lineman, because you had to build that offensive line, but I get it. Okay, whatever. So you could have gotten a defensive lineman in round 2, because that's what I had said at the time I would have done. O-line round 1, D-line in round 2, and then with the third round pick, instead of taking Michael Dieter, who to this point, he's been okay at center for us, but it took 3 years, and then he's on injured reserve. He's not coming back this week. Is he really working out? Right? Instead of taking him, I would have took quarterback Will Grier in round 3. He could have been the guy behind to develop behind Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then eventually even behind Tua. Right? Or whatever. Or maybe you can get a draft pick for him if you end up bringing in Ryan Fitzpatrick and then you don't want to keep that kid. Maybe he goes to the practice squad, right? There are different options there. But it gives you so much more flexibility, and it's so much smarter. And it's way better at prioritizing. So that's how they started off in 2019, even fucking this kid before he got here, because of the tank philosophy and the quick turnaround requirements of it, and because of how they drafted and navigated that situation in 2019. Okay, then in 2020, it doesn't get any better, because one, it was stupid to go spend all that fucking cap space that they did, which put them in, in situations where they're not able to fucking, get top tier offensive linemen the next year, whatever, right? Well, first of all, if you're going to spend the big money too, for me, I didn't like any of those moves that they made. Even though, ironically enough, some of those guys that they brought in, like Ted Karras and Kyle Van Noy, ended up being leaders on your team that helped to propel you to 10 wins in 2020, ironically enough, and then they just cut them all this year. But if you're going to spend it right. Again, one of my philosophies is not to be a big spender in free agency. Be a lot more conscientious with how you spend your cap space. Don't just fucking open the floodgates and think that it's going to fucking solve anything. And instead, maybe they could have gotten a top tier offensive lineman instead of, dumping it to all these guys who, just ended up getting cut the next year, or like Byron Jones, instead of signing Byron Jones, who I think is overrated and not worth that contract. And also that by doing that, you also help to facilitate the issues and drama with your other star cornerback, Xavier Howard. You could have avoided all that and maybe got, a top tier free agent offensive lineman. Instead, they choose to go get Eric Flowers, who then they end up paying $6 million to get rid of this year, etc., etc. But then when you look at the draft, so okay, they take Tua in the first round with the 5th overall pick, but then they get motherfucking Austin Jackson, who's been a fucking train wreck. An absolute fucking train wreck. Okay? And, so it's like, how I get it, right? People, and we haven't even gotten to all of the picks and stuff, but like, I get it, right? And Eric Flowers ends up being a waste because he's not even here anymore, right? Not even here anymore. You can also point to, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but you can also point to, the fact that Eric Flowers is one of the best players at his position for Washington football team. Jermaine Illuminor, you know, Ted Karras is actually doing all right where he is. I think it was Ted Karras. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. These guys that the Dolphins let go, these free agents that they did pick up, they're obviously not good enough at evaluating, etc., etc. Anyway, so, and then, oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back to 2019, though, real quick, too, because I do want to make sure I get, you know, touch on to some points about Flores' ego, especially when it comes to the coaching staff and not having veteran guys. Although it applies to the offensive line that he's put in front of Tua as well, because he doesn't have any good established veteran players on that offensive line. Jesse Davis has also been a fucking train wreck. But so, you know, Pat Flaherty, the offensive line coach that Brian Flores fired 4 days into training camp in 2019 because he said that Michael Dieter and Shaq Calhoun were not ready to go into the lineup yet, and he was an established veteran offensive line coach. He fires this dude because he was intentionally trying to tank the 2019 season and insisted on having those two rookies put into the lineup. Ironically enough, Shaq Calhoun, and I've said this a million times, turned out to be one of your better offensive linemen that year, and he kept just fucking benching him and putting him on the inactives list even though he never got hurt or anything, and left Michael Dieter in because even though he was complete trash, because again, he was trying to lose games even on game day. But anyway, so the point there is that he is also, and you know, you also fast forward then to now where he is cycled through so many offensive coordinators and offensive line coaches that is also fucking Tua, because it makes it then that much more difficult to evaluate him when he's got such a garbage fucking offensive line in front of him. Has to learn a new playbook, right? And then, well, you know, sticking on to Brian Flores, the fact that he doesn't have a head coach that completely supports him and buys into him, and then thus that trickles throughout also other parts of the organization, that is so terrible for the development of a quarterback. And the offensive line being shitty, new offensive coordinators every year, new playbooks every year, things like that stunt a young quarterback's development. Putting him in 2020 when he wasn't fucking healthy yet, when he was only 60%. You start to then build bad habits, right? And bad habits can be hard to break. We did see that with Josh Rosen too, right? He was behind a shitty offensive line in Arizona, started to build some bad habits over that year. It didn't get any better when he was with the Dolphins because he had a shitty line here too. So the coaching staff is fucking him in a lot of ways. Anyway, getting back to the motherfucking draft though, so you completely whiff on Austin Jackson, a first round pick on an offensive lineman that is complete fucking trash, in part though because you don't know how to, or you don't know how or are incapable of developing these players, right? You just accepted going into the 2021 season that it's going to be perfectly fine. We have all these young linemen, draft picks of ours and whatever, and we can coach them up. Obviously the fuck not. You fucking suck at it. You're terrible at it. Your development is shit. You can't develop for shit. For shit. Anyway, so you whiff on Austin Jackson, and then of course you waste a motherfucking first round pick on Noah Igbenogany, when instead maybe you could, for me at the time I actually said I wanted Xavier McKinney, one of the top safeties that was still on the board in that draft. Okay, which then maybe could have, you know, freed up the Javon Holland pick this year, and then maybe you could have gotten like Tevin Jenkins or maybe Sam Cosmi or something with the 36th overall pick. Or maybe you could have afforded to move up a slot or two to get a running back. Or in motherfucking, in place of the Noah pick, maybe you could have got a running back there. Interesting. Although, funny enough, because the way, if I remember correctly, the way I had said I would done it is, well, first of all, you know, I have a different philosophy when it comes to quarterbacks and stuff, and I don't generally like to take one in round 1 or 2 ever. I would take one in rounds 3 or later every single year, thereby always having fresh young competition. You can find, I mean, again, the greatest of all time, Brady was in the later rounds, so you can, and Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, you can find great players in the later rounds. You can always have fresh competition. You let the cream rise to the top. You get your starter, your motherfucking backup. If somebody comes in and outplays them, they jump the ranks. You always have young quarterbacks that you can use for trade chips, etc., etc., and then you invest primarily in the trenches in the first 2 rounds. That's my philosophy. So I wouldn't have taken a quarterback anyway, and with the Tua pick, I probably would have taken an offensive lineman. And then with the Austin Jackson pick, I probably would have took a defensive lineman, and with the Noah pick, then I would have taken Xavier McKinney, and then with the Robert Hunt pick, I probably would have gone running back, right? J.K. Dobbins was there. I know we got jumped for him, but they could have moved up maybe a spot or two to get J.K. Dobbins instead of the Ravens, right? So that's how I would have done things. But I also said at the time that if we're going with the take quarterback in the first round thing, like, is the philosophy of most people, I would have took Herbert over Tua just simply because Herbert is the more prototypical size. Obviously, a couple quarterbacks had already come off the board. Well, Joe Burrow had come off the board at number 1, right? But he is that more, and he is more of the prototypical size and physical traits, but he's also doesn't have as concerning of an injury history as Tua, and also because I did not trust this regime or this organization to properly build a line in front of him. So I knew ahead of time that if we took Tua, we were going to be stuck in a situation where the poor kid's going to have to run for his life, and he's probably going to get injured because he is a little, as per the prototypical measurements, he is a little bit smaller and does have a bunch of injuries. So that's what I would have done if I was going quarterback with that route or in that situation. But then Austin Jackson, I not even close. There were definitely, again, I mean, was it Tevin Jenkins at some point? You could have done things so much differently. You could have gotten again, with those earlier picks, you could have got a running back. Look, they could have even took Robert Hunt in the second round if with those other first round picks, instead they get maybe a defensive lineman and then a running back. Also, by the way, if you give your motherfucking quarterback a running game, which they haven't, that also helps him. And so that's another way in which they have fucked this poor kid, by not giving him any kind of legitimate running game. And then even when they do have a running back like Myles Gaskin, who is actually somewhat performing for you, they just don't commit to it. So it's just a fucking joke all around. But anyway, and then, Raekwon Davis, I like him. He's actually grown on me quite a bit. That was a decent pick, from Jump Street. But, he's overall, though, he's been all right. He's one of our better offensive linemen for sure. And I actually think he's better than Christian Wilkins by, quite a bit overall. Now, he is still young. He's still got to build a lot more consistency. He's got to stay healthy, and so on and so forth. And I think he still needs to do a little more work, but still fine, whatever. Anyway, so, and then, Solomon Kinley, what's going on with that? And then, some of these other picks, it doesn't matter. Isaiah Prince in motherfucking 2019, that didn't work out. He's cut. Some of these other guys, they're just whiffed picks because they're not on the team anymore. But your inability to properly draft also indirectly sets him up for failure. And I say indirectly because it sets the team up for failure, but he's part of the team, and it makes his job even harder when you don't have a properly built team around you and you're failing on draft picks. You can't properly develop these guys, etc., etc., etc. And then, so again, but going back to some of the things in 2020, right? Putting him in when he's not fully healthy and he hasn't, he's a rookie. He's still trying to adjust it. I was one of the people that said he should be redshirted the entire year. Let him sit, learn behind Ryan Fitzpatrick, get adjusted to the NFL life, learn the playbook, get fully healthy, etc., etc. Because remember, I was the guy that broke down, or, not broke down, but I made just a video of just all of the clips of all of his interceptions and would-be interceptions. And he had a ton of would-be interceptions. And so I was one of the guys that pushed back a bit and said he actually had a bunch of times where he made bad decisions because people were saying that, oh, because of his touchdown to interception ratio, that alone proves that he was making good decisions. I pushed back on that. But it wasn't to say that Tua was bad or that he was a bust. It was simply to say that he made bad decisions. Now, in that video in particular, I didn't go into the reasons why, but I have been on record to say that had a lot to do with the fact that he was 60% healthy and they put a shit offensive line in front of him that he couldn't trust. The fact that, in the playbook and stuff. But then there's another aspect to some things that happen because there's the benchings. A lot of people want to talk about that, especially like Tua haters. They want to talk about, oh, why did he get benched, et cetera, et cetera. Well, first of all, they never should have put him in to begin with. Although, to be fair to Brian Flores and the coaching staff, I do firmly believe that actually was a call down from Stephen Ross, who said, and that's ultimately why Brian Flores in that situation got proven to be a liar after he had said in the San Francisco game post-game press conference, why would I put him in for garbage time when he's going to hand the ball off? Right? If he was my kid, I wouldn't want to rush him along. So to be fair, and of course, again, as we know, Brian Flores doesn't really have his back. He doesn't, he's never been on the Tua train, never wanted the kid to begin with. So that probably has a little something to do with it too on his side and why he probably didn't want to put Tua in. But I damn well guarantee that it came down from Stephen Ross. That's why he went into garbage time for the Jets game the following week. And then that's why he ended up getting named the starter the week after. Well, it was actually, I think, technically 2 weeks because we had our bye week and then he came in as the starter, if I remember that all correctly. Anyway, point is, but back to the benchings. It fucks with the kid's fucking... now, he's a super tough kid, and he's definitely good at overcoming adversity, blocking things out, etc., etc. But eventually, it doesn't matter how strong you are, eventually you're going to break down. And so, you do it early and often, starting in his rookie season. You bench the kid, you're fucking jerking him around, and now, of course, we've heard reports recently that players in the locker room are pissed about how he handled Tua. Well, of course, because this is who Brian Flores is, and I've been pointing it out since 2019. But so that's another way in which you don't do the kid any justice, don't do him any service, and you fuck the kid, right? You set him up to fail. Okay? So let's see. Did I miss anything from the 2020 season? No, I don't think so. I mean, because then they keep fucking around instead of taking, Penei Sewell. Well, first and foremost, so let's go into free agency. They didn't sign a Corey Linsley. They didn't sign an Orlando Brown. They didn't sign any of these guys who would be not only veteran leadership and presence on that offensive line, but actually quality players. They didn't do any of that shit, so they're like, fuck it. We don't need none of that, right? In the draft, but instead, they want to go and get, Will Fuller, who has done absolutely nothing for us, pay him $10 million and stick him into a wide receiver room that's already fragile as fuck, right? That's another thing. They just accepted it. They're like, you know what? We're going to go into this season. There's a ton of talent in our wide receiver room, but we made sure that damn near every single one of them is brittle as fuck. So that way we get to fucking week 5, 6, and 7, and they're not even close to fucking sniffing the field together, because they're all goddamn fucking hurt. That's another way in which you screw the young kid over. Because then he's cycling through wide receivers. He doesn't get to play with the starting lineup. They're just constantly being injured, blah, blah, blah. It screws everything up. Anyway, back to the motherfucking free agency. So they don't get any of the veteran leadership there. And then, of course, the veteran leadership purge that they did, Ted Karras and Eric Flowers being part of that, hurt the team as a whole, as we've seen, particularly on defense, because, guys are not being lined up properly and so on and so forth. But on the offense, too, when the offensive line, they're the worst offensive line in the league. You don't have any of those veteran guys, right? Like, none of these young guys don't have anybody to lean on, right? But then you also pass up, right? So after those, offseason moves or lack thereof, and when it comes to the offensive linemen, right? Letting go of the veteran leadership and Ted Karras and Eric Flowers, also paying Eric Flowers. You then let Illuminor, you cut DJ Fluker, you let Illuminor go, right? He ends up being one of the better offensive linemen for the Raiders. You let all those guys go. You don't bring in anybody like a Corey Linsley or Orlando Brown or whatever. You don't do any of that. And then you also pass up on the top tier blue chip talent when it gets to fucking draft time because, oh, you got to go get another one of those bells and whistles, even though you have a very deep wide receiver room to begin with. Fuck it, man. We're going to pass up on Penei Sewell and go get Jalen Waddle, and then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, so I don't understand, to me, and then, of course, the bad play calling, the misuse of fucking these players, again, having not only a new offensive coordinator this year, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of them, however goddamn many there are, right? Have all these offensive coordinators, another young fucking inexperienced offensive line coach, right? They got rid of Jim Caldwell a year or two ago, 2 years ago, then fucking Chan Gailey, going back to Flo's ego and his inability to handle other alphas or pushback from anybody, right? Like, all of these things fuck with the development of your young quarterback. The funny thing, though, is he still is developing right in front of your eyes and getting better each and every week. And then, but it doesn't stop. Another added layer to the ways in which they're setting this kid up for failure, the Deshaun Watson stuff. The distractions that cause, the dude has to look over his shoulder each and every day and try and be perfect each and every day in hopes of checking off a whole bunch of boxes on a fucking checklist that's impossible to fucking check off, so that way he doesn't have to worry about the dude that's creeping up behind him to take his fucking job, who's not even here. He's not even on this roster. He's in another organization, and the dude's got all these fucking sexual harassment allegations against him. Right? Now, I've been firm on this in my stance, innocent till proven guilty. I think even if he was guilty, the NFL and these powerful entities could and would find a way to fucking sweep it under the rug because they do want one of their star players to be in the league. But all of that still exists. So this dude has to deal with it. And not just through training camp, but all the way through till the motherfucking trade deadline. Like, it's a fucking joke. I don't understand. It blows my mind how anybody could look at the situation that this kid has been put in and say that they have set him up for success. And if your only argument is that, oh, well, look at the wide receivers that they put. Okay, well, where the fuck are they? Okay, man, but they look at all the draft picks and stuff that they did for the offensive line. Okay, but how's that working out? They fucking suck. What about the run game? Why can't they give them a fucking run game? Why can't they commit to the run game? Why? Why can't they do any of this stuff? And none of it. Look, just because they tried to do it doesn't mean that they fucking get credit for fucking helping this kid out. No, they don't. If they fail at all these moves that they've made, if they can't properly develop guys, if they're fucking constantly having turnover on the roster and the coaching staff, there's no continuity, etc., etc. If your head coach doesn't believe in you and wants to go get somebody else, what the fuck do you think is going to happen? Do people not learn anything from the Ryan Tannehill years, or subsequently for him now being as successful as he is in Tennessee? Have we not learned anything from any of that? No, this organization has not put this kid in position to succeed. Not even close. Not even close. And frankly, the fact of the matter is the data and the evidence, when you actually look at it, instead of having this lazy surface fucking, evaluation to say, oh, well, man, they put a ton of resources and look at all these wide receivers they got for him and look at their scheming for him. Bro, instead of just, there's way more to the picture than that. Way more to the picture than that. So, like, it's annoying to me. It's annoying to me because, I mean, look, and to kind of wind this down, we're, I don't know, we're like 8 days or something like that, 8 or 9 days away from the trade deadline, something like that. And it can't come fast enough for me, because I want even though, look, this organization is a disaster. I've been telling you guys this. I've been telling you who Brian Flores is since fucking 2019, because he showed his colors early on, right? I was never a fan of Bill Belichick disciples to begin with. I was never a fan of the tanking philosophy to begin with, but he showed his true colors. I've been pointing these things out all the while. I've been telling you guys the development is bad. I've been telling you guys that the coaching is bad, that the drafting is bad, all of this, okay? But now at this point, I need the trade deadline to come, because as bad as this is, and as much as I, don't see anything getting fixed, I just think that, the worst thing you could possibly do for this organization at this point is to completely give up on this kid and replace him with Deshaun Watson, as great as a quarterback as he is. And again, this is not, for me, it has nothing to do with the fact that Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback, because he is unquestionably physically, the physical traits that he has, the experience he has, etc., etc. It's not about that. And if I'm keeping it real, the allegations, while those are serious, that's not even the only problem that I have with it. I don't want to spend all of that cap space. I don't want to give up all of that draft capital. Right? Like, I just think it would be the ultimate desperation move. And I guarantee, just like I told you guys, this tank philosophy and everything was going to fail over a 3-year period. It's going to backfire, and it's going to set us back, fucking years. And I think it's a complete mistake. And especially because, again, with Tua, man, he is showing progress each and every week. He's showing that heart. He's showing, that when he makes a mistake, he can come back, bro. And he can get you back into the game and set you up for success, right? He's shown that elite release time. He can get the ball out so fast. That is one of the traits that he has that is elite. His pocket presence is elite. The only reason why there has only been 1 sack the past 2 weeks has been Tua. That's it. 100%. His ability to get the ball out quick and his ability to manipulate the pocket is outrageous. And that is the reason why we don't have any sack, or the 1 sack. Okay? But and his ability to come back from critical mistakes, that's pretty elite too. Okay? And so, look, man, there's stuff to build around this kid. I just think it would be a massive mistake to make this move, and I hope it doesn't. I've never been on board with the Deshaun Watson trade, and I just think it's a complete disaster. It further fucks your draft classes. But look, at this point, though, the relationship is not good. It's not good, right? Flores and Tua's dad fucking hate each other. It's a fucking mess. It's a giant fucking mess. And from Jump Street, this poor kid has been set up for failure on every single fucking level, bro. Again, and people undercount how much or how important it is that your head coach believes in you. The fact that he never wanted this kid, and in the entire time has, been more recently pounding, and for this year been pounding the table for this other quarterback that wanted Justin Herbert over him. I mean, there's some things I can't talk about, some behind the scenes things that I've heard, but and that I've been told that I can't talk about right now. But like, just the way he's treated this kid, he's never been fully bought in. He's never fully supported him. He hasn't cared about his offensive line, and he was just okay with putting a shit product in front of him. He was okay with not giving him a running game. He was okay with, his stud wide receivers being fragile pieces of glass, right? Like, I mean, he was perfectly fine with all of that. And that's not how you set your quarterback up for success. Right? He didn't give him a good coaching staff to help him develop, etc., etc. So it's just a job. And then, and the organizational things like the bad drafting and so on and so forth, that, ejecting all of your fucking your veteran leadership this year, and being wild and flagrant with your offseason spending a year ago. All of these things, those things, the bigger picture organizational issues are not as direct as the offensive line in front of him or the running game, but they also affect him because they affect the team, and he's on the team. And if you put the entire team in a position to fail, obviously he's going to be in a position to fail as well because he's part of that. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you slice this thing. Every which way, they have set this kid up for fucking failure. And it's just been a giant fucking disaster. And so to end it, man, again, I hope they don't trade for Deshaun Watson. I want the trade deadline to come and go without that happening. But I do ultimately think it's going to happen, which I think is a shame. But I would love to see this kid succeed here, man. And I do think he has a ton of potential. And I think he really could be the guy for us if they just stopped being fucking stupid. If they stopped having the wrong blueprints to start with, right? And if they stopped with their dumbass, the core fundamental philosophies, and actually build a proper team around him. Build in the image of the Saints, like I said before. As a matter of fact, though, I'm one of those people that thinks this kid deserves better. I mean, all these players deserve better, bro. They're in such a shit organization that's a giant fucking dumpster fire. But the Saints are a team that if he is to go somewhere else, the Saints are a team that I've been saying I would love to see him on. That's one of the top teams for me. So, but it's just a mess. And at this point, what do you do, man? Because the relationship has to be fucking trash, bro. Like, I can't imagine, like, he's such a nice kid, so, he's not going to say anything publicly, but he's got to be thinking about this, and he's got to feel, like, betrayed and shit like that, and they can't ever squash these rumors, bro. Like, even if they don't end up trading for Deshaun Watson, they just literally couldn't even come out and say that we're not going to trade for Deshaun Watson, and the reason why is because they're in on Deshaun Watson, man, and they're not in on Tua, and it's so bad. I feel bad for him, bro, because he was set up for failure from Jump Street. All right, I got to get out of here. This rant ended up going on for about 45 minutes, but I had to get this out there, man, because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I wanted to talk about it, and because, again, one last time, man, when it comes to personnel decisions, the constant flux on the coaching staff, the fact that his head coach doesn't believe in him, the shit offensive, I could reiterate all the things again, bro, but from Jump Street and from everything that they did, it's so disappointing, and I feel bad for him. So anyway, I got to get out of here, though. Make sure you do check out the Rave On Sports App, the new fan-based, fan-driven sports app that is aiming to enhance your game day experience with live game day replay or game day play-by-plays and chats with other fans, chats with content creators like myself. Check out for the links in the description box. And with that, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comments section. And of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at DillonTartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Phins up.